Welcome back to 115 Reading, guys. My name's Ethan, and I'm continuing my Sun Eater reread, getting ready for Shadows Upon Time. So that means today we get to talk about Demon in White. So Demon in White, from what I can tell, seems to be the consensus fan favorite among everybody who reads the Sun Eater. They usually say that Demon in White or Disquiet Gods is their favorite book, and I'm a little bit on the outlier in this sense. I don't think Demon in White is my favorite book, but it's pretty up there. I do think Demon in White is pretty incredible, and I want to talk a little bit about Demon in White and some of the things that I liked more on this reread, and some of the reasons that I think Demon in White is considered the fan favorite, and maybe why I disagree or agree. On my first time through the series, I think it was up between Demon in White and Howling Dark for my favorite book. I think on the reread for these first three books, I still think Howling Dark might be my favorite. But Demon in White was still great. In fact, Demon in White was even better on this reread for so many reasons. I think when I first read it, the reason Demon in White wasn't my favorite is I remember feeling like the other books in the series, and especially when I compare it to Howling Dark, felt like they were more thematically coherent. They fell together as one piece. Like everything in Howling Dark, I think, works with those themes of Hadrian establishing his relationship with the quiet, as well as Hadrian evaluating the relationship between man and machine. And everything that happens in Howling Dark is working towards that goal. It makes Howling Dark feel like a very cohesive, self-contained moment in the story. Whereas Demon in White has a lot of what almost feel like on your first read, like one-off, separate little story arcs. And you'll see this mentioned as a pro in a lot of people's reviews. A lot of people talk about how Demon in White feels like five books mixed into one, and how there are like these five distinct story arcs throughout the book. And like that's obviously true. And a lot of people that they viewed that as a pro. To me, I don't want to say it so much as a con as it is that Demon in White was fun for me on the first read because all of the plot and all the different story arcs were fun and nice, but I couldn't really tell what about Demon in White, what thematic message or point ties these five things together. And so that's why I felt like Demon in White in my mind was not my favorite when compared to Howling Dark. So on this reread, I was really laser focusing while reading Demon in White and trying to figure out what is the theme of this book? What is being tackled in this book? What is the message Gracchio is getting at? Or is there one? Is it just a loose collection of five different plot arcs that are important for the major narrative? And I think on this time around, what struck me is I think Demon in White is about Hadrian finding or wrestling with why he should fight for humanity and why he should fight against the Cielsen. And I think this is a very important question to ask at this point. We know that Hadrian is going to destroy the Cielsen, and instead of seeking peace with them like he tried to do when he was younger. And it begs the question: why did Hadrian turn against the Cielsen and the goal of peace with the Cielsen? And why did he turn back to fight for humanity? Because in the first book, Hadrian is very much that kind of character that doesn't like the empire, has a lot of cynical thoughts about humanity, and and so you're wondering, how does Hadrian get from there to the person who's willing to destroy a sun to wipe out this alien race? And that's what Demon in White is about. And this is what I think ties all of the story arcs together, because there's this scene, like I think like 200 something pages maybe into the book, where somebody asks Hadrian, "Why are you doing this? What are you fighting for?" And the reason they bring this up is because characters are wondering, why do we keep going on? What's the point of this fight? Why are we fighting for these people, for humanity that is so often evil or greedy, and who do things to harm us? So many of the characters are in danger throughout Demon in White, and they're being targeted by other humans within these political schemes and plots. And so people are asking, why are you fighting for this empire, Hadrian? Like, why are you fighting for humanity? Humanity's not doing anything for you. They're turning against you. Why would you turn against Cielsen and side with humanity in the face of this? Aren't they both evil? And that's the question that I think Hadrian is dealing with. And so that's where I think the first two story arcs play into this theme. Because you have the first arc, which has Hadrian fighting against the Cielsen once again. And when you're brought face to face with the sheer inhumanity and evilness of the Cielsen, that informs Hadrian's character in one direction. We fight for humanity because the Cielsen are so much worse. I come to that scene where they fight Ayubalu, and you find the shrine of all the human bones and skeletons within the ship, or the body that's being eaten on the slab. When confronted with that evil, you almost think, okay, so humanity, I guess, is a necessary evil, right? I guess we have to fight for them because the Sea Elson are worse. That's one element that you might think of coming away if you just read the first 200 pages of the book. And then you get to the second arc with the political scheming on Forum, and suddenly you're hit with this, okay, yeah, the Sea Elson are bad, but the question that's explored in the second arc is, are humans much better? Because once Hadrian gets back to Forum, suddenly all the other people on Forum, all these humans, all these lords and lions are trying to destroy him. They're trying to kill his friends. They're trying to kill him. They're trying to humiliate him. And so you're left asking, okay, yeah, the Sea Elson are bad, but is the Empire better? Is humanity even better? Are humans just animals, just like the Sea Elson? What about them is worth fighting for? Why should we fight at all? And if you come away from that second arc, I think that's what you're going to be thinking about. Like, yeah, the Sea Elson are bad, but look at all these things that all these greedy, ambitious, selfish humans are doing to Hadrian. Why should he fight for them? He should just leave this conflict altogether. And that's why I think the third arc of the book is so important, not just for Demon and White, but as we'll see throughout the entirety of the Sun Eater series, and why it's so important. Because the conclusion that I think the book reaches to is that humanity is worth fighting for, because there is always good even amongst the bad. There are bad elements of humanity, but there are good elements of humanity. And those elements, because they will always be present and because they will always exist, they're worth fighting for. These elements like family and friendship, right? These things are worth preserving and fighting for humanity. And that's where we have Hadrian's relationship with Gibson, and Hadrian's relationship with Valka, and Hadrian's relationship with all the members of the Red Company, and why that is so important. Humanity has both good and bad, and that good is worth fighting for. Humanity is worth fighting for because it produces the Gibsons, because it produces the Valkas and the Alaras and the Polinos and the Sirens and the Switches and the Corvos. Like, all of these supporting characters of the Red Company are what give Hadrian his drive and his motivation to fight for humanity. Even though there are bad things about humanity, the good will always outweigh the bad in terms of how impactful it is. And we're going to see this later on in the series, of course, when we get to Disquiet Gods. This theme is going to be driven home even harder when we meet Hadrian's daughter, Cassandra. And that is going to be the ultimate reason why Hadrian pledges himself to the Quiet, why he's going to save the universe that the Quiet is in, because that is the universe that his daughter lives in. And his daughter is born of all these good things that we see in this third arc when Hadrian and company come to Colchis and they meet up with Gibson, and they have that those years off where they can, enjoy each other's company and live life together and have these good moments in the midst of the bad. Those are the things that are worth fighting for, that are worth clinging to. And while, some people may read this and think, well, that's simplistic and lame or whatever, like, I think knowing especially that so much of this is inspired by Tolkien, it's that kind of almost fairy tale good versus evil element of Rakio's writing that comes through, that's inspiring and that's great. It's what makes the story so emotionally impactful and relatable, is when we reach for those simple truths of life, the fact that good will always be worth fighting for, even though there is bad in the midst of that. And I think that's the conclusion that Hadrian comes to, especially after that third arc. And I think that's why it's so important. And it's going to be a major series or a major theme throughout the entire series and throughout this book. And that's why Hadrian rallies around and decides to fight, commit back to his fight against the Sea Elson when we get to the final two arcs, right? We get his trip to Annika and his trip to Berenike and the fight there, and why he commits to helping defend the people there because of this time in this third arc, and because he has found something that he is fighting for. It's not just that he's fighting against the Sea Elson, it's that he's fighting for the good of humanity. It's that he's fighting for the good that comes about in life, for his friends, for his family, right, for his mentor. These things are worth fighting for. It's worth fighting for light instead of just fighting against darkness. I kind of want to ask this question. I don't really know if it's really going to mean much in this video, but it is interesting to me that Demon and White is such a consensus favorite. Most people view it as their number one. And I was wondering why that is. And if I were to hazard a guess as to why so many people prefer Demon and White over the other books, my personal theory is that the Demon and White is the most fun and the most traditional space adventure, Star Warsy adventure feel out of all the books. This is the one where Hadrian is a warrior and a knight. This is the one where Hadrian has his whole crew with him from the beginning, and they go on a bunch of different space adventures. And this is also the one, this is very important, where Hadrian pretty much almost always wins or gets on top or is always right. And so I think this is probably why most people like Demon and White, because Demon and White is the coolest one. Hadrian and gang keep going on fun adventures. They keep discovering new things, and they keep doing these epic action sequences and beating monsters and outsmarting political leaders at every turn. And Hadrian accesses new cool abilities that seems like you do all this cool stuff. And when you compare it to the other books, right, especially compared to something like Kingdoms of Death, Ashes of Man, Disquiet Gods, Hadrian goes through so much and gets so depressed and loses so much. And those books are important and they're impactful, but they're not cool and they're not fun like Demon in White is. That would be my personal theory why I think many people view Demon in White as the best one. I think it's the most straightforward space adventure of the six. I think the main character is at his most competent and at his highest peak. He's the coolest he's ever been, and you get to read about him and his friends going on adventures. And I think people naturally gravitate toward that vibe. And you compare it to something like Kingdoms of Death, and it is, a night and day difference, which is on purpose. Me and myself, as much as I love that fun vibe and all that, I think much prefer the emotional impact of the hardships that Hadrian is going to go through in the future books and what Hadrian went through in Howling Dark. I think that just is a little bit more emotionally impactful for me than Hadrian going on cool adventures throughout the entirety of this book. I mean, this book is still great. Like, it's still probably top 2 or 3 for me. But I think I prefer the emotional impact, especially of books 4 and 6, a little more than this one. But the reason you need this book is you need to have Hadrian reach a peak before he can fall so low in book 4, and you need to have this book where Hadrian and friends go on space adventures and bond together and strengthen their relationships, because again, it's about that theme, because these are the people that Hadrian's going to fight for, and that's what's going to be important going on in the series. So you need this. You need this hopeful, fun space adventure before things get a lot more depressing. But that's part of the theme of the major series, because as we'll go forward, seek hardship is a major theme of the series, and that's why I think the other books might be a little bit more impactful for me. But that's just my theory about why people like Demon in White more. Maybe people disagree with me. That's my personal theory on why Demon in White is the fan favorite. But again, like, if somebody told me Demon in White is their favorite, I totally understand. Like, I mean, that makes sense. It is such a fun book. There's so much good stuff in it. There's so much good character work. The action scenes are incredible. There's some incredibly hype moments. I didn't even talk about, things like the fight with Ayubalu or the arena scene, and like all that stuff is great. I pretty much love Demon White alongside everyone else, but I think I prefer some of the emotional impact that the future books are going to bring. But we'll get to that when we get to our reread. So up next, coming up, I'm going to read Fool's Fate. I think next I'm going to finish the Tawny Man trilogy, and then I'm going to read Kingdoms of Death and Ashes of Man as one, and I'm probably going to review those as one video, since those are supposed to be one book. Maybe that's booktube heresy. I don't know. When I first read through them, I read them as one book, and I think I'm going to read them as one book again. So maybe, who knows? Maybe I'll get 2 videos out of those books. I haven't decided yet, but they're one in my mind. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, that's my review of Demon in White. I think it's incredible. I think it's awesome, and I totally understand why it is a favorite and why people love it. But I also think that there is so much better to come in the next 3 books.